Ms. Sweeney, did you bring a Marine Guard, or is he here for a purpose of introduction? I'll now turn to Senator Dan Sullivan,
Thank you,
Sullivan,
Mr.
also of Alaska, for purposes of
it's
introduction.
both, but I'm here to introduce her. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Vice Chairman Udall, thank you very much for the opportunity to say a few words before this very well-qualified nominee before you, and a dear friend of mine, Tara Sweeney, who, as Senator Murkowski mentioned, is making history in many ways as the first Alaska Native to be nominated for this very important position. Now, I know that Tara's Inupiaq culture often values the collective success of their vast community over individual success, something that I think all of us could learn from. Nevertheless, I would like to spend a few minutes talking about Tara's individual characteristics that are so important for someone nominated to a position of public trust like this. And these are characteristics of integrity and intelligence and humility. And yes, to Senator Tester's question to me this morning on the floor, certainly toughness and discipline and an absolute determination to work for her people, her state, and her country. Now, I've had the privilege of knowing Tara for a long time, and through her and my wife Julie, I've also had the privilege of learning and knowing about more and more the culture of Tara's culture, her people, the great history of Alaska's Native people, who make up almost 1/5 of the population of our great state. Tara is a proud Inupiaq whose family is from Utqiagvik, where right now, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, in her home village and villages across northwest Alaska, the citizens there are in the throes of spring whaling season, an ancient tradition that feeds the body and soul of Native communities throughout the area. Amazingly, today's Alaska Native whaling captains and crews still hunt using handheld harpoons and go into the icy waters in hand-skinned boats as their ancestors did for thousands of years. And it's this kind of fidelity to Native culture is what I think really defines Tara. It's in her heart, it's in her soul, but it's also the ability to marry traditional cultures with the modern world, sometimes against long odds, that is an enormously important part of Tara and a very important part of the wonderful and powerful narrative of her people. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say a few words about the Alaska Federation of Natives, the largest Alaska Native organization in a state encompassing 229 federally recognized tribes, as well as 150 village corporations, 12 regional corporations, and 12 regional nonprofit and tribal consortiums. It is certainly one of the most well-respected organizations in all of Alaska. The history of AFN, as we call it, formed a half-century ago, as one of the great stories in a state full of great stories. Brave men and women from all across the state who fought for their land and fought for self-determination and won. This was not easy. They were demanding that the federal government recognize their rights to nearly 150 million acres of land. This was at a time when Alaska Native villages were severely impoverished and disease ran rampant. And they enacted the largest lands claims settlement act in history and continue to fight for their people, for their culture, and for all of us in Alaska and indeed across the country. Tara grew up in this history and in this story. Her relatives were involved. Her village leaders played a decisive role. This is a crucial part of her legacy, and when she became old enough and experienced enough, she ran for and was elected to be co-chair of AFN, a remarkable achievement that, in my view, alone qualifies her for this very important position. And during her time leading AFN, she spearheaded reforms to empower tribes. She also focused on issues like access to capital, self-determination, technology deployment, and very critically, economic growth and good jobs in rural Alaska Native communities, some of the poorest communities in our nation. These are some of the critical issues that she also focused on in her many other leadership positions in organizations such as Arctic Slope Regional Corporation, the Inuit Circumpolar Conference, the National Conference of American Indians, and as the chair of the Arctic Economic Council. This is the experience and focus she will bring to all Indigenous peoples throughout our country. I'm absolutely certain that there's no one who will work harder for the rights, for the economic empowerment, and for the culture of America's First Peoples than Tara Sweeney. Finally, in conclusion, Mr. Chairman, as we all know, we're coming up on Mother's Day this Sunday. Tara's late mother, Eileen McLean, was a legend. Like her mother before her, Tara's Akamai, she was a strong Alaska Native leader who was respected throughout our state. She was a teacher, the president of the Inuit Circumpolar Council, and a well-respected Alaska state legislator from District 40. Eileen's legacy lives on throughout our state. If confirmed, that legacy will live throughout our nation through her very well-qualified daughter, Tara. Tara, Alaska is very proud of you. We are all thrilled by your nomination. Kwayana, for being willing to serve our country. I am confident that my Senate colleagues will respect and honor your achievement, experience, integrity, and deep cultural commitments that make you an ideal nominee for this very important position. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan.